Hey there, and welcome back to our book club. If you are new to us, we are studying Picture Perfect Practice by Roberto Valenzuela. We are on chapter 8, Silhouettes. So silhouettes are really an outline against a much brighter background, and silhouettes are all about shape and form. I've seen actually some really cool silhouettes during the pandemic by some news journalists, and they really can tell a story because they don't have a lot of personal detail in them. So I've seen pictures of empty streets of New York City, and you'll just see a single man with the outline of him and maybe his hat walking across an empty street, and that really tells a story. So that's really what a silhouette's about, is not using a lot of detail, but using the form and the shape to really put yourself in the situation, leave the reader or wondering what's going on, or telling a story with that shape without a lot of detail around it. And you'll see some examples that I've pulled from my own work to show you. And I'll give you some examples of good silhouettes and maybe silhouettes that could improve and why they could improve. I found some that were like, okay, but I can see how they'd be better. So I'd like to point that out as well, because I think we can really learn from pictures that are almost there but not quite. And you can see when somebody points out, this is pretty good, but it could be better. I think that's also really helpful. So I'm going to leave this part of it really short, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into the sample pictures. All right, so let's take a look. So the first thing that Roberto does say about silhouettes is while they're great photographs, he recommends using them sparingly. So I found quite a few examples in my work, but it's not something that I use all the time. If I'm shooting professionally, I might use it here and there for a specific reason. Sometimes I'll do it just for fun when I'm shooting for myself. So just know that you can overdo it, but it's a lot of fun to learn. So let's first jump into the vital components of a silhouette. And first is the very bright background that creates contrast. So let's just take a look at a couple of examples here. This one is not a great example necessarily, but I wanted to show the bright background. So here you can see the stage lights are behind this, and you can see the form of the man. Okay, so the really bright background is really how you create the silhouette. So what you do is you set your camera to expose for the bright background, but then you focus on your subject. So you get a really crisp subject, but you set your camera for the bright background. And if you're not familiar with using manual, so manual works best. If you're not familiar with that, it's really easy to think of when you're using your smartphone. I want to show you an example. And you won't be able to tell exactly on here, but when you use your smartphone and you touch the brightest part and it makes it darker, or you touch the shadows and it makes it brighter, you can make it brighter. What you want to do is, if your subject's right here, it's basically like you're touching the background to set your exposure. And then if it's bright enough, that means your subject will completely black out, because the difference between the background and the subject is so different. And that's the key to getting a good silhouette. These don't work well in midday sun. So if you go out at 3 o'clock and you've got a bright sky and you've got a bright subject, that's not going to work. You want something where the sun is setting behind you and it's really bright. So if you exposed for that bright sunset, it's going to black out your subject. You've probably gotten a lot of accidental photos like this, where you've shot into the backlight or you've shot into the sunset and your subject went dark. You're essentially making or using the principles of making a silhouette. So that's the first thing, is you have to have a really bright background. And I'll give you a couple more examples. So here, this is the ocean, okay? And we've got a really bright water here, the sun's hitting the water, and we've got our subject is blacked out, and we've got a really nice shape. Another thing is the surfer. It was a really bright morning, and the water was really bright, but you can see that the surfer is all blacked out, along with some of the water, but it creates a nice shape. So that's the first thing that you have to have, is you have to have a really bright background to create contrast. So your subject can't have any light falling on it. So like I said, if it's 3 in the afternoon and you're standing in the bright sun, but you also have a lot of sun on your subject, then it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to black your subject out because the background and the subject are too equal. That doesn't work either. The next thing he says is you can't have a flash, obviously, because you don't want to light your subject at all. And then the most important thing, I think, is clear and recognizable shapes. So let's take a look at a couple of examples here. For instance, this was a corporate job that I did, and I've got the corporate logo in the back, but I also have the camera. It's very clear and identifiable what you're looking at. So if it was turned differently and it didn't have that distinct shape, it would not be a good silhouette. Another example would be the little puppy dog. Okay, so very clear and identifiable shape. You know exactly what you're looking at. I think most of these have pretty clear and identifiable shapes. I should have pulled one that maybe, like these can be tough where you're doing jumping because it has a clear and identifiable shape, but you might want more exacting. So, but you can see that if the arms were not out, if they were in, and everything was in a ball, all you would see is a black ball. So you really need limbs extended, you need identifiable shapes. So really anything, like I'll give you an example here. Here's a sunset. It has a very dark, bright background, and there's no light falling on the subject, but you can see here that the feet are starting to fall into the dark sand because it's getting very dark. So here we're not getting as defined of a shape as we would like to see. It's starting to fall into like it's a big mush of dark colors. So this would not be a great example. It's close, but it just got a little bit too dark. My exposure was a little too dark, and we started to lose the shape and the definition at the lower half of her body, if that makes sense. Right. So what you want to do is you want to expose, we already talked about this, but you want to expose for the brightest part of the picture. So in this example here, we are exposing for the sky and the sun flare, which loses all of the light on her, but we're still getting some definition down here from the light hitting her legs. So we still get a nice, clear, identifiable shape, and we're getting some light on the balloon. So this one is more of like a partial silhouette. We've got our subject silhouetted, but we're still getting the detail of the balloons. And so he talks about partial silhouettes where sometimes it's nice to kind of do a silhouette, but you still want to include some of the details. And so a couple, I'd say the first one that I pulled like that would be this one with the balloons. The second one here is a maternity. We're starting to fall into a silhouette here, but you still have some details of the dress. You still have the details of her belly. And this one is probably even more of a silhouette. So here she's mostly blacked out. We just have a little bit of light on her face and along the front of her body to give the shape. We've got a little bit of the detail of the dress. So this is more of a partial silhouette where we're getting the idea of a silhouette, but we're leaving in some of the details. And he talks about this in the chapter. Now, the thing that we talked about in terms of posing, so if you're posing people and you want to do a silhouette, specifically couples or more than one person, is you don't want them to be standing so close together that all their shapes like meld together. You have to create distance. So if you're posing a couple, facing them and putting their heads together and showing that distinct shape. Here's an example of little Abby and the dog. So you can see a little girl with a dress, a ponytail, a finger pointing, the dog looking at her. You see all of those details. If we were to turn her forward or turn the dog forward, we wouldn't see that distinct shape and we wouldn't be able to tell what we were looking at. So let's go ahead and let's just look at some more examples real quick. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The hardest part is just, like I live in Georgia, so we have a lot of trees and we have a tree line. And so it's really hard to get a silhouette if you don't have a bright, bright background, whether it's water whether it's light, lighting from a concert, a sunset with a clear horizon. That's why beaches work so well, because there's a clear horizon, there's no tree line. In Georgia, it's not very flat, it's pretty hilly, and you have a tree line. So there's really never a way to separate the subject from the background. So in this case, let me show you this particular one. We went to the top of a hill, so we got above the trees and we shot up. And so that's really the only way that we were able to do that. So let's just take a look at all these examples really quickly. So here again, we have the beach, we have a very distinct background, and it's easy to expose for the sky and black out the shape. And here we've got a very distinct shape as well. So it's very easy to distinguish what we're looking at. Here I was just sitting on the beach. Again, we've got a surfer, a very distinct shape. The surfboard, we've got the little child playing in there. We've got the bright water. We've got a lot of very distinct shapes. So it makes for a great silhouette. Here was a concert, and again, it had a very bright LED wall, but because you can clearly see all of the shapes, you can see the piano player, the guitar player, another guy playing the guitar. You can see what they're all doing, and so just because they're blacked out and you can't see the detail of them doesn't make it a bad picture. It actually makes it kind of cool. So it takes the attention to the backdrop and the LED wall, and then it just leaves the singers to the imagination. Again, this is just, here's some more of a documentary style. So we were just on a ferry back from an island back to Ohio, and the sun was setting. So we had a really bright background, and my daughter was just looking out into the water, and she had the cute little bun that she always wore at this time of her life. And so I was able to expose for the sky, so you can see I have all the details of the clouds, the sunset, the water, and just black her out. And this is a way to tell the story of how she wore her hair at this time of her life. So that's an example of using silhouettes in storytelling. Here's again, for a while I was shooting some concerts, and so that was just a great way. I was actually shooting for the camera company, so capturing the shapes of the camera was important in the storytelling. I think this one's probably a better one, but you can clearly see the guy holding the camera. I would probably crop this a little bit over here and get rid of these guys. And then over here, if they needed to use this for advertising or whatever, they had a lot of negative space. But it's a very distinct shape, and for the client that I was shooting for, this was the perfect image because it showed what they do. Here, this is another sort of street type image. So I was in Puerto Rico, and I was touring one of the historical sites there, and this little boy was running down this tunnel. So we've got the bright end of the tunnel, and we have this little boy with a distinct shape. He's all blacked out because I've exposed for the detail of the end of the tunnel. So you can see the rock and all the detail. You can see the pebble stone. So this is all well exposed, which makes him black out. And he's just kind of in the perfect spot in the tunnel between the dark and the light that you get the shape of him. Here was an early morning photo shoot. We were getting ready, and it was a beautiful morning, beautiful sunrise, and the gal's brother was putting up the net. We were going to do a beach volleyball shoot, and I just looked out, and he was a perfect contrast to the water. So the sun was rising over the water. It was a bright background. I exposed for the water, so you can see I've got the mist on the water, I've got the ripples of the water, you've got the color of the sunset, and then it just blacked him out. And again, I focus on the subject, so he's nice and crisp. You can see exactly what I'm doing, and this tells the story of the morning, what the morning looked like, what he was doing, but it doesn't have a lot of detail. And then this was later on. So this was the actual photo shoot, and this is, I would say this is silhouette, partial silhouette. Now, one of the things, if I could change this photo, one thing I would change, if I could put a little separation between her head and this tree line, and it was more in the water, then I think it would be a really good silhouette. I think it's a pretty good silhouette because we still have some mist and some light giving her definition between the tree line and the water. So I still like the photo, but if I wanted to make it really good, I would create some separation between the trees and her head and have some of that water go all the way around that. And that's just a composition thing. Raise the camera up a little bit higher or have her move forward a little bit. But otherwise, I really like that you can see the reflection of the sky, you can see the mist on the water, you can see the sunrise, and basically you just get her shape. I might have even given her a little stronger shape in the arms, but overall, I like the photo a lot. Again, this is another one, go to the fair, just looking at the Ferris wheel, exposing for the sky, blacking out the Ferris wheel, and just getting that distinct shape. Here was a couple shoot that I did. I saw a bright window. We were in a parking garage, and I just asked them to get together. And again, you can't mush them all together or you lose all the shape. I love this photo. I think you can see them very clearly. The one thing I might change, if I could, is if I could move her head away from the edge of the window to have a little bit of that light over there. I think it would be even better, but I like the photo. They liked the photo. That's all that matters. But what I did was I exposed for the outside because it's very bright, and it made everything on the inside black out. And so you get a silhouette. Again, here's kind of a partial silhouette, so you're getting some detail, but it's mostly out of sight. So you expose for the outside. We're in a barn. So the sun's on the outside of the barn. You can clearly see the horse's head. You can see the girl's shape. You can see what she's doing, the rope. It's not all mushed together. I'm exposing for the outside of the barn, which makes the inside black out, but I'm still getting that nice rim light around the horse and around her hair to show the shape. And again, if I could change this, I would do one thing. I would move her slightly so that the tree here is not all the way touching her head. I'd like to see some separation there so we have more of a distinct silhouette on both sides. But again, I like it. It tells a story. You can see what she was doing. We talked about that one already. Here's another one. I was out for a walk on a job in Maui, and the sun was rising, and this beautiful tree against the sky, and there was nothing to, because we had the water and the sky, there was nothing to take away from the shape of the tree. So I was able to expose for the sky. And when I say expose for the sky, I mean I'm able to see the cloud details, the mountain details, the water, the colors in the sky, and it blacks out the tree. But because the tree has such a distinct shape, it makes a beautiful silhouette against the morning sky. Now here are some senior pictures that I did, and this I just exposed for the sky. And I love this. I wish maybe her hair didn't mush up into her arm. I wish there was maybe some separation. If I were to do this better, I like it again. But like if I could do her hair tighter back so there was more distinct shape of her other arm, I think that would improve this photo. And maybe even seeing some of the ground. But again, this one was taken, I was standing, there was a little hill, so there was a little reservoir, and there's a hill. And I was standing down the hill, and she was at the top of the reservoir, and she jumped, and I took it shooting up. And that eliminated all the trees in the background, because otherwise, if I would have shot it straight on, then there would have been trees right behind her. But because I was able to get down and shoot up into the sky, I was able to eliminate any of the background distraction. Because obviously, if we had trees back here, you wouldn't see that silhouette. She would just blend into the trees, and it would just go away. So if you're having trouble with silhouettes, make sure you're getting good separation from anything in the background and your bright background, like the sky, the water, whatever. And this is the final one. So we went down to Krog Street Tunnel down in Atlanta, and it was this really cool tunnel with tons of graffiti, and we were in there just taking some pictures, and all of a sudden we saw the sky riding through, and because the tunnel is so bright at the end, we kind of exposed more for the bright, a little bit, not really for here, because that would have blacked out the entire tunnel, but we exposed more for the bright spots in the paint. And what that did was it blacked him out. And if we would have exposed for him, if we would have made him bright, it would have blown out the detail in the rest. Maybe I can show you that. Hold on. So if I come in here and I want to make him show up, If I get rid of the silhouette, look what happens to everything else. It blows out. I can see him now, but if I expose for here so that this looks good, it gets rid of him. So then I get a silhouette. And so that's what I mean by exposing for the area around your subject, not for your subject. Because when you expose for your subject, you'll blow everything else out. Because there's such a big difference between the background and your subject, really you can only expose for one or the other. So in the case of the silhouette, you're choosing the background. So let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to see your silhouettes. If you need inspiration, look on the hashtag silhouette or silhouettes on Instagram. There's millions of them, and there's a lot of really cool ideas out there. So if you're kind of struggling or don't know what to do, that's a great place to start. So I'd love to see your pictures. Use the hashtag #TheBigGirlSchool, and we'd love to feature you. So let us know. And if you need the book, if you're just joining us on Chapter 8, you can buy the book from the link in my profile. It's the Kindle book. It's cheaper, and then you have it with you wherever you go. And then you can always go back. I have a video on IGTV for every chapter so far. So you can start with silhouettes and go back. It doesn't have to go in order. This is all about training your eye. So you can do this. If you want to do silhouettes with your iPhone, you totally can. Just tap the background and darken out your subject. And that's really easy to do as well if you don't know how to use manual on your big girl camera. So let me know if you have any questions. Leave the comments below, and I look forward to seeing your pictures. Thanks.